Hello, and welcome to A Peace and Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Gorley. And this podcast, you can listen to a book, hear some commentary, and just generally enjoy your life. So, good job out of you for being here, wherever you are, I guess. Not here, but, being around and listening to this, because I hope it's awesome for you. All right, so we're in chapter 13 now. Jen is kind of back to school, doing her thing, and then she goes on to youth group and ponders life and all that stuff. And it's almost as if things are going a little bit better, but maybe not quite yet. Or maybe eventually. I don't want to give anything away. All right, so it's chapter 13. So we're going to kind of get right into it. We are going to read it and then commentate. All right, chapter 13. It was third period world history, which used to be Jen's favorite class because she shared it with Morgan. However, Morgan had been absent for 4 days in a row, which was odd because Jen could have sworn that she'd seen Morgan in the hallway that morning, walking with Zoe Davidson. The bell rang, and now she was stuck in Mr. Harris's class, Morganless. Mr. Harris began class. You need to complete this map of the countries of Africa, complete with capitals, and make sure that you properly label each country and capital. There will not be room for you to just write the name of every country and the location on the map. Just make sure you label clearly with an arrow or a line to show where they are located. If I can't read it, you're not getting credit for it. You can work with a partner, just make sure it gets done. Jen quickly glanced around the room in case Morgan had come in late. Her thoughts were interrupted when a voice from 2 seats over, with equal parts volume and annoyance. Hi, Jennifer. Jordan, what do you want? Where's your best friend from Camp Rock? I don't know. She's probably out plotting your doom. Ha ha ha. I'm not scared. You should be. You should be. Wow, you can be quiet now. Wow, you can be quiet now. Jen raised her hand. Mr. Harris, what's this country here in the far side of Africa? That's Mozambique, Mr. Harris said in an even educational tone. Yeah, can we send Jordan here to Mozambique? Jen asked in a pleading voice. I already looked into it. I had the same idea a few weeks ago, and turns out they don't want him either. Turns out they have a ban against annoying students who don't do their work. Sorry. Disappointing, isn't it? Mr. Harris said, beginning with a straight face, but it faded into a big smile. Jen laughed and laughed and laughed, a little surprised that Mr. Harris had actually said something funny. Who knew that was possible? Jen moved to an empty seat and spent the rest of her time studying her map of Africa, smiling when she spotted Mozambique. Meanwhile, Jordan and Mr. Harris argued back and forth for 20 minutes. Their discussion points could be best summarized as teachers aren't allowed to talk about students like that versus students aren't allowed to be irritating and not do their work. When the bell rang, Jen sprang to the door, hungry and hoping to have enough time to finish her lunch today. The hallway was a set of dueling rivers, one river flowing toward the cafeteria and the other churning away from it. Students floated like leaves caught in the current. They sometimes switched tributaries once their friends, boyfriends, girlfriends streamed into their classrooms. Sections of the river moved fast or slow depending on who you walked behind. Jen definitely preferred the fast section since she did not consider the hallway a place to be social. Jen wanted to get from point A to point B as quickly as possible. She floated past the pooled up places behind dams of students, a couple embracing, kissing, and seemingly grinding so hard on each other that they looked as if they were attempting to start a family in the hallway. Other groups of students vending cell phones, video games, Yu-Gi-Oh cards, and what Jen thought looked like prescription meds. Just as she thought she might actually get to lunch before the lines were annoyingly long, the girls she had been following stopped abruptly, causing Jen to almost run into them. Jen spun, looked to go around them, and ran right into Chance, the redheaded kid from her bus. Geez, now you're walking like a retard, Chance said with a laugh. Shut up. Ha ha. Chance laughed in Jen's face. Jen shoved him and walked away. What the heck is wrong with people? Why do people have to say stuff? There's nothing I can do about my mom. I can't win. Luckily, it's just this idiot. I'm sure Chance's family isn't exactly Ivy League material, but still. Jen refused to think about it anymore. As she continued down the graded hallway to the gym, an interesting pattern on the opposite side of the wall-to-wall people caught her eye. It was a circle of dark light with light brown in the middle. Jen realized people's heads formed this pattern. It made slightly more sense when she saw that it was Drake walking in the middle of 6 girls. 2 girls walking ahead of him, glancing back and laughing every few steps, and he had a girl on either side of him, and 2 girls walking behind in perfect symmetry. Drake turned to talk to the girls behind every few seconds. There were 3 blondes and 3 silky black dark hair. 2 of the girls had curly hair and 4 of them straight. All were beautiful and made up perfectly. Jen doubted that Drake had purposely arranged them like that, but it was still ridiculous that the girls were apparently oblivious to the fact that they were walking in such a perfect light shadow symmetrical contrast. As they were heading the opposite way, Jen caught a glimpse of the last blonde and dark-haired girls bringing up the rear of Drake's harem. It was Morgan and Zoe Davidson. Part of Jen wanted to say hello, but they seemed so far away in the crowd of students, so she just kept walking. I'm sure the last thing Morgan would want is her uncool friend embarrassing her in front of Drake. I know she probably doesn't want to be bothered. I feel like if we were back in 8th grade, she still would want me to stop and say hi to her. Crazy to think that was just 6 months ago. A lot can change in 6 months. After school, play practice went much better. Jen had gotten used to saying her lines to the point that only occasionally kids would mock her about her first practice line reading. Jen left school in a good mood, even despite the knowledge that she had another young people's meeting that night. Reverend Adam referred to these meetings as youth group. Youth group had been going pretty well in the last few weeks, while Jen probably wouldn't go if she wasn't being coerced. All in all, the meetings were pretty painless. That was a vast improvement from anything she had experienced at church as a whole. It was still located at their boring church, and they still played games or did activities that were kind of lame, but they were slightly better than any had done in school. However, there were a couple things that were much better than before. First, there were more students than ever before. It wasn't a lot of students. It wasn't even enough to fit a school classroom, but there were like 15 to 20 students or so that begun coming to these meetings every week. Some of the same annoying students came, like Brian Browning and a couple of his friends, but there were others too. Reverend Adams' cousin Madison continued to come from McIntyre High and started to bring a couple of her friends who were very pretty and stylish. While Jen didn't really click with them, they were pleasant enough, and an 11th grader named Caitlin and her boyfriend Ben came. They mostly just talked or argued with each other. While Jen didn't talk to them much, she did enjoy listening to their banter. Evan, the jumpy kid Jen had met at the first meeting, kept coming. He started to bring his friend Justin. Evan seemed to be much less nervous with Justin there, and it was obvious that he was just pretty shy. Most interesting, there were 6 to 8 students that Reverend Adam had met at the park, which Jen couldn't decide if that was weird or cool. Jen pieced together that he had spotted these kids skateboarding at the park, struck up a conversation, and then took them out to lunch or brought them lunch, and then he'd invited them, and they actually came. They definitely did not seem to have ever been to church before. They cussed and talked about a lot of bad things they did. Elena would have flipped. They skateboarded in the church parking lot, wrestled each other for fun, and unlike Jen, had absolutely no fear of saying anything inappropriate in front of Reverend Shepherd. On several occasions, a perturbed Reverend Shepherd called Reverend Adam to come talk to him in his office after youth group. They seemed so far from normal church people. Jen thought it was interesting that most of the new members of the youth group had families that did not even go to or attend First Congregational Community Church. But probably the most tolerable thing about youth group was Adam himself and his wife Lindsay. They seemed so young and cool and nice, and they were just so chill, as Morgan would say. They did not seem annoyed or angry when they heard the skater kids cuss or talk about inappropriate things. They just nicely reminded them that they were in church and they should keep things church appropriate. While Reverend Shepherd looked shocked and disappointed, Adam and Lindsay took it in stride and didn't seem to think any less of that the students were a little rough around the edges. They seemed to genuinely care about them. They knew movies and musics and had iPhones, and they were even slightly traditional in the and they were not even slightly traditional in the way they looked or dressed. Adam and Lindsay seemed to sincerely love and annoy each other in a way that she had only ever seen from her Aunt Julie and her Uncle Ed. Jen was continually surprised by how fun and kind Adam and Lindsay were. They were so real. There was something about them that Jen wanted more. It was hard for Jen to put her finger on what it was that she liked about them. But the more she thought about it, it was that she felt that they really cared about her and everyone. Jen had other people who cared about her, but there was something about them, how they cared without pitying, that appealed to Jen. Jen remembered one specific conversation she had with Lindsay. "Jen, I love your shirt. It looks so soft and comfy." "Oh, thanks. So, how's school and play practice and everything? Is it going any better?" "Yeah, it is. It's good enough that I'm not noticed anymore, which is good." "Huh, that's funny." "Yeah, sometimes under the radar is a good thing. Stuff going okay at home?" "Yeah," Jen answered with a little hesitation in her voice. "Yeah, Reverend Shepherd told us a little bit about your family. I'm sure it can be tough, but I think God knew what he was doing. I think he put the right young woman who is strong enough to be in your position. You seem like you're doing a great job with everything, although I'm sure it's tough." "Yeah, I guess," Jen responded unconvincingly. Adam, who was close enough that at one point Jen wondered if he was eavesdropping, ended his conversation with another student and said to Jen, "That's right. You're strong. You got this, girl." And he flexed his muscles in demonstration. "And seriously, though, if you ever need anything, Adam and I are always here for you. Even if you just want to go get coffee and take a break." "Wait, do you drink coffee?" No," Jen answered with a smile. "Tea?" Lindsay asked with a hopeful smile. "Yeah, tea," Jen said, smiling back. "Okay, tea or lunch or whatever." "Yeah, and when is your play again?" Adam interjected. "November 13th, 14th, and 15th. "Excellent. We'll be there with bells on," Adam said with an awkward expression on his face. "Bells on? Really, Adam?" Lindsay asked. "Yeah, that's what closers say, Linz," Adam said, laughing. "Okay, Gus. Well, that's my husband," Lindsay said with a deep, audible sigh, eye roll, and shake of the head and smile. Lying awake in bed, Jen kept coming back to what Lindsay had said about God knowing what he was doing and that she was strong enough to be in her position. It was odd for Jen to think of herself as strong enough. Almost every day, Jen felt like she wasn't up for the challenge. She felt like she couldn't do it. Every time she felt like life was finally going okay, Elena or someone else or even Jen herself would do something to make her lose whatever feeling of life competency she had. Yet of all the people she knew, she wasn't sure anyone else could do what she did, even though she didn't know if she could do what she did. She pondered the possibility that she actually was the right person to handle the struggles of her life. And that was chapter 13. So it's a kind of chapter if things are kind of going okay. You can see, Adam and Lindsay being a positive influence in her life, which is great. And I'll talk about that a little bit in a second. One of the things I want to comment on before I get into the bigger stuff, but talking about the hallways, I always felt like the hallways were like so crazy in high school. The way, I don't know if it's our way our school was designed or just, we had a lot of students that went there. I think it was maybe like our school's maybe designed for a little bit less. Geneva High School circa late 1990s. I know I'm like super old, that's when I went to school. Although I probably have some listeners, some of my some of my friends are listening that are older, but are like, oh my gosh, 99 is not even that old. But to me, it feels old, and probably to a lot of you as well. But yeah, I think our school was just like was pretty big for that. So our hallways were always so crazy. Like yours, like you could barely move when you tried to go fast. There was like always people in front of you. Sometimes crazy stuff was happening. Um, you know, all there. So yeah, I kind of get into all that, but it's a little wild sometimes, for sure. I remember that very vividly. Also, you kind of see a little bit of maybe Morgan's becoming in this kind of in crowd with this dude Drake, who for a minute there, Jen was kind of crushing on him. Had a crush. She thought he was tough, liked him and all that, but she kind of not really thinking about that anymore. And then now looks like Morgan's kind of moved in to be, in that like circle of popular people and everything that Jen doesn't really feel like she's a part of. And she kind of mentions in passing like, man, it was only 6 months ago that we were like in 8th grade and we were like best friends and inseparable. And a lot can happen in 6 months. And that's definitely true. Man, it's wild. Sometimes if you dissect your life and look at 6 month periods, sometimes things can change a lot in 6 months. Talking about even relationships, friendships, jobs, opportunities. So many times where if you looked for, man, just there's so many things can change in 6 months. It can really, your life can get really, really different really fast and stuff. And Jen is kind of experiencing that. But yeah, I want to talk a little bit about, the youth group thing and the Adam and Lindsey, them just being a really positive influence in her life, And I know as both a teacher and a youth minister, I've helped out with a lot of like church youth groups and like church teen groups and stuff like that, small groups, and, just trying to be a positive influence in students' life, which I feel like for the most part I've accomplished that, although there's always times where I wish I could have done better and dealt with situations better and generally been nicer, although I probably was pretty nice for the most part, I would think, but maybe not. I don't know. But the funny thing about that though is you never really know the impact that you have in people's lives, right? You just don't see it. Like, as a teacher, I have all these students I've had over the years, and like, once you've been doing it, like, I've been a teacher for, full decade and a half now, like full 15 years. And, it's funny that you just kind of don't see the kids again. I eventually like catch some of them on social media and, based off their social medias, some of them look like they're doing well and some of them look like they're not. But I really, and even that, it's only like a few students, I really don't, you just don't really, you have no idea whether I think I taught them good. I think like they were good. And I do always try to teach people. I wish I really be kind to people. That's like kind of the most thing. Like to me, if I can just like love people, like I feel like Jesus loved people, like in the Bible. Like that's kind of like my goal. If I can just do that, if I can just love people in a way where they really feel like genuinely like valued and cared for, I feel like it's a win. And even like teaching, it's like there are very, 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 very few actual items of content that I remember teachers teaching me, right? Maybe like in college the most, but like high school, I like barely remember anything that any of my high school teachers like taught me, like scholastically. But I remember exactly, I would say I remember every single teacher, like what they were like in class, like how they treated the students. Like I always remember that. I can tell you exactly how I either felt or how they were as a teacher, or like I remember that vividly. But as far as actual like academic content, like I don't even remember. I remember very few lessons that I ever had in like high school and elementary, but I remember what every teacher was like. And I think that's as like a teacher, if you're a fellow educator, or if you're involved in young people's lives, like just how you treat people is like probably the most important thing. You'll remember that. People remember that more than anything. And so as an encouragement, I actually recently talked to a guy at this youth ministry that I was working with, and this guy kind of said, I just don't feel like I'm really like doing anything with these kids or like making a difference or like really like helping them at all. And I was just like, yeah, I don't know, man. Like, that's kind of like normal. Like, you just never know what you feel. And it's funny is that I'll have people that are like, people who were in my church youth group years ago or in my classes at school, whatever. And they'll like come up to me and be like, oh my gosh, I remember you. Like, I remember you were like, you were just like so meaningful in my life. And like sometimes it's like random. Like I wouldn't expect that, sometimes it's like, really? Like you seem like I'm like almost surprised about it. Like some people I'm not, some people like you really kind of, you can tell like vibe with you, whatever kind of thing. But then there's other students that like, they barely talk to you or like they're really quiet or like, you just don't assume that you would like had any impact at all in their lives because they like, didn't really express it at the time very much, Oh my gosh, you were just like the most meaningful person in my life at that time, or you were like my favorite teacher, and you're like, really? Like I just, I had to send you to the office like 10 times during the year because your behavior was so bad, but like that's cool. I'm glad that, you felt like I was still meaningful, just stuff like that, where, you could almost like take stuff personally, like, oh, well, that student didn't really like me because they didn't listen to me in my class. But that's not always the case. Sometimes students that, they might not have great behavior, but they probably didn't have good behavior in other classes too. You weren't special. They were just kind of maybe didn't have great behavior in all of them. So they were happy to, you still made a difference in their lives kind of thing. And man, I was so blessed recently. Literally today, I ran into one of my old students, and this was such a nice student I had years ago. Shout out to Luis S. Anyways, yeah, I like met up with this student that I had, and I had him like I think like in 5th grade or something like that. And then he went to our church for like he attended the same church I went to for a little while, and everything too. So I kind of knew him from that as well. But just such a not like just a nice kid, like just very very, very likable. Not all your students are likable as a teacher. I'll tell you that. No, they're all. I like all my students, but some of them kind of sometimes get on your nerves sometimes. But this kid was always like super nice, super likable, really smart, like really tried a lot and stuff. And it was cool meeting to him. I kind of like, caught him on social media, like, a few months back. So anyways, we ran into him in the store and stuff. And bro's like, he's like 20 now. He's like a welder. Bro's like more manly than me. He's like this, this big strong man now that welds things, He's a cool guy, man. And, but it was nice. He like just seemed like he generally was really happy to see me, and, kind of mentioned that, he really enjoyed having me in class and stuff. And yeah, it was just super nice to catch up. He said you might even, come visit the church I'm attending someday again. But yeah, it was just really great. So like I say it to say, it's very easy when you are a person that's trying to be influenced in people's lives. Sometimes you never know the way that you can affect someone in a positive way. So if you're out there doing something, you're trying to be there's one Bible verse like Galatians says don't tire in doing good, for at the proper time you'll like reap like a harvest. Basically just like, sometimes it's taxing trying to always do the right thing, trying to be like a good person and stuff like that. But hang in there, because it's worth it. It's worth it. It's worth making a difference even if you don't always see it. It's very easy to be like, oh, it doesn't matter. Nothing I'm doing, the nice things that I'm doing doesn't really help, but they do make a difference in people's lives, I think. So yeah, so I was really happy to see that kid today. So shout out to there. And a couple other things real quick. We had a psych reference in there, so that's kind of a deep dive thing. But at one point, the Reverend Adam he quoted a line from one of the characters, Gus, in Psych, and he said, "I'll be there with bells on," which is like a weird thing that You know, it's like obviously it's like a saying, but that's like an older saying. But like the guy in Psych, one of the characters in Psych said it like it was like a new cool thing or something, but it was just kind of a weird thing to say. And they kind of call him out on it. And he's like, what? That's what closers say, Sean. So anyways, like that. So shout out to that. That's a wonderful show. If you've not watched it, it's just about this dude. This kid is like really smart, and he is very smart and observant. And his dad was like a former police officer and was like training him how to be like a police officer, but he wasn't feeling it. He wanted to go off and like kind of goof off and do all this crazy stuff. But then he ends up being a police consultant for the police department, and he pretends he's psychic when really he's just really smart and very, very observant. And he's very smart like that, but he like says he's psychic and stuff like that. And it's like really crazy. It's like funny. It's like, you know, it's sort of like it's still like, you know, a lot of them are like murder mysteries and stuff like that. So that part's not as funny, but it's still funny, like their reactions to different things. And they're like best friends. This guy, like Sean, that's like crazy, and his friend Gus, who's like an accountant. Everybody needs a good friend that's like an accountant, right, Terry? All right, I'm just kidding. So that's one of my best friends. He's an accountant. So I was teasing about that. Anyways, it's a wonderful show, though. Like a lot of shows, you can probably skip the first season altogether. The first season's not great. He kind of flails around when he does his psychic visions. It gets annoying really fast. But in season 2, it's kind of toned down, and it's just better. It's a good show. Excellent show. All right, so a little shout out to one of my favorite shows. I had to put that in my book here. Make a reference in passing about it. And the very last thing in this episode, it kind of ends the chapter with her thinking about that idea, like that she's strong enough to live her life. And I know life sometimes will hit you hard. And other times, even my own life, that is, for the most part, going really well. There's just been times where I've been so down where I'm like, man, it's just like, it just seems like you can feel things so hard sometimes where it can be really hard. Life can just hit you so hard sometimes. But you are strong enough to live your life, and you can do it. And if you are struggling out there with something and you just really don't know if you're the one strong enough to do your life, reach out to somebody. Reach out to a friend, or somebody you look up to, whatever, a mentor, or anyone that you consider a really good friend, or if you have family that you're close with. Reach out to them and talk to them about it. But you are put in your life for a reason, and you can do it. You got this, bro. You got this, girl. You got this, peoples. And I think that is about it. All right, well, thank you so much for joining us this episode. I hope you're starting to kind of get into the book even more. I think it just kind of picks up steam from here and stuff like that. And I hope you are just enjoying this more and more. And thank you so much for listening. Tell your homies about it, especially, if they're in that whole age bracket that this book is written for, being young adult, like teens, middle school kind of thing. All right. Sounds good. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye.